Уважаемые участники, коллеги,
Dear colleagues, dear participants,
буквально 30 секунд ждем.
we're gonna wait for 30 minutes and then we will start. Thank you.
27, 26, 25, 20. Так, думаю, можно начинать. Спасибо всем.
I think we may start. Thank you very much, dear ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to the conference devoted to the 100th anniversary of the International Labour Organization within the framework of the Astana Economic Forum. We have three aims. So number one is to discuss the technological revolution over the labor market. The second is to look at the challenges that leads to the reorientation of the professional market. And the third aim is to how to ensure the social guarantees. The world is going through the social and other challenges right now. So I would like to mention about the new competencies and Kazakhstan has been taking those traits into account. So Industry 4.0, for instance, the big data, artificial intelligence, blockchain, all of those technologies have been changing the labor market. At about 140 million jobs are going to disappear by 2022. Especially we're talking about those professions with the repeated processes. Over 3 billion jobs are going to be more complicated. And we have to train our personnel with the new competences and the new qualifications. And secondly, and it is very, very important, that the technologies will lead to the creation of the new jobs and the new employment market. Over 30% of the market is going to be comprised of new professions. Two numbers have been presented before, 140 million versus 350 million new jobs. So we're going to be talking about a mix of the traditional technology and the new technologies. So therefore, we have to closely look at the national vocational training system. Plus, our colleagues have been mentioning about the free employment market that provides for maximization of the labor market. The position provides for the popping up of freelancers, those people who work at home, for instance, and the overall share is going to be not that so all of these challenges need to be addressed, and this is something that we face in our real life. So again, I think that today is going to be a nice platform to discuss those modern challenges. Again, dear participants, I hope that you had a chance to exchange your opinions on the most important issues related to labor market. So I would like to commence our session devoted to Industry 4.0. The speakers are going to have up to 7 minutes, and then after the session we are going to have a Q&A. So now the floor is given to our distinguished guest, Mr. Giovanni Capanelli, who is the country director of the Kazakhstan resident mission of the Asian Development Bank. So he's going to be talking to us about good jobs for inclusive growth in Kazakhstan, findings from the recent ABA study. Thank you.
Everyone, thank you very much, Vice Minister Mukushev. Vice Minister Mukushev has outlined some of the key challenges moving forward for the labor market, mostly focused on the supply side of the labor market. What I'm going to present upon now is a broader framework for policymakers that looks at the labor market more in general, not only on the supply side, but also at the demand side of the labor market, as well as the importance of strengthening institutions and governance, a bit along the lines that we heard in the previous session today. And my remarks are going to be based on the result of a study that the Asian Development Bank has recently concluded. The study title is Good Jobs for Inclusive Growth in Central Asia and the South Caucasus. Obviously, the choice of this topic, good jobs for inclusive growth, fits, I believe, very much in the policy agenda of most of the countries in Central Asia, and particularly for Kazakhstan. Now we know that in Kazakhstan, the government places, especially this new government which was formed in February this year, great importance on improving social indicators and the people's quality of life. Therefore, the capacity of creating good jobs for inclusive growth is a critical factor, especially for the lower income groups, as the incomes of families, in fact, depend on the salary that family members can earn through their jobs. Obviously, families may also have some form of financial assets, but the key assets that they have is their provision of their jobs. So therefore, Kazakhstan needs to pay great attention to its human capital formation and the way the returns that human capital generates are distributed across a population. The government can actually work to creating a system that promotes good jobs for inclusive growth, to form human capital and related skills, and ensuring that the returns on labor are actually distributed across the population. At the same time, inequality can also be mitigated by social security systems and other forms of public transfers. However, policymakers in this case must make sure that such transfer remains sustainable over time. Obviously, they will incur into fiscal problems. And as also the Vice Minister mentioned, another very important factor are the forces of technological change, which are conducive of rising labor productivity in the long run. And these forces, however, as they shift the demand away from basic labor to skilled labor, they also create a challenge to inclusive growth, putting downward pressure on wages and unskilled labor. So given such broad context, what should Kazakhstan, this is the question, and policymakers in Kazakhstan do in order to create good jobs for inclusive growth? And here is again, this study suggests that policymakers should look at both the demand side as well as the supply side of the labor market, and they should look at strengthening governance and institutions. So there are three key features of the Kazakhstan economy which must be taken into consideration in selecting policies promoting the demand side of the labor market. First, agriculture. Agriculture still employs a very large share of low productivity jobs, or about 20% of total employment as of now. Kazakhstan needs to transfer this pool of low productivity labor in agriculture to higher productivity manufacturing jobs. However, as we know, shifting jobs from agriculture to manufacturing implies the presence of a sustained demand for non-resource production. As you know, Kazakhstan economy is so much based on oil and gas. So policies promoting economic diversification and high value added exports are therefore very important to achieve inclusive growth and promoting good jobs. Second, the economy of Kazakhstan, as we know, shows a large share of self-employed people and the presence of a large level of informality. Some estimates suggest that the share of the informal economy in Kazakhstan is more than 40% of GDP. And for those of you who follow Kazakhstan, you know that one of the first announcements, public announcement made by the new Minister of National Economy, Mr. Dalyenov, was focused, in fact, on the need to limit this shadow economy. This is certainly a step in the right direction. As we know, there are obviously on both sides some benefits in maintaining a certain degree of flexibility and informality. However, when you calculate the costs, you find out that the costs of the shadow economy tend to overweigh by a large measure its benefit. So a higher share of formal employment is also important, shifting away from informal, from the shadow economy to generate tax revenues and provide social security protection, especially to the most vulnerable workers. And a third aspect from the demand side is that obviously in a country like Kazakhstan and in most of other Central Asian countries, there is still large room to develop the private sector. And in this case, policies promoting private sector include those that are aimed at enhancing factor productivity. We heard it in the opening session of Astana Economic Forum this year. President Nazarbayev mentioned that. Improving the business climate, reducing red tape, strengthening small and medium enterprises, entrepreneurship. And again, in the opening session, we heard Madame Christine Lagarde talking about the importance of strengthening governance. So these are all important aspects for promoting the private sector in Kazakhstan. Now, on the supply side, and we are going to talk a lot also other speakers later on, strategies are needed to develop human capital by building skills in high demand and promoting job security within a frame of the labor market flexibility, what we always call flexicurity. Policies for human capital development includes those improving the quality of education and technical vocational education and training. And we know from a number of studies that this is an area, what we call TVET, technical vocational education and training, where Kazakhstan now really needs to focus. And flexicurity, as we know, is about social benefit reform in order to increase labor market participation, enhancing the information system and using active labor market policies, which are also key areas for Kazakhstan where the country has to catch up. And finally, schemes for social protection should be designed for groups considered at high risk of vulnerability, such as the unemployed, people with structurally low incomes, and those carrying disabilities. There is one more, actually, supply-side policy, which sometimes can be put in either demand or supply side, but this area refers to investing in infrastructure and public services. And in this regard, Kazakhstan, as we know, shows a high degree of spatial inequality due to pronounced disparity among those who live in large cities, like Nur Sultan here, and those who reside in secondary cities or in rural areas. And the government actually recently has launched a very large program to invest in the next 5 years something close to $2.5 billion to address such disparity and improve the quality of life in rural areas by developing basic social infrastructure and public services. Now, the third area is governance and institutions. And here to promote good jobs for inclusive growth, policymakers should also strengthen institutions that reinforce labor market intermediation and introduce policies to improve governance and reduce corruption. Unfortunately, according to Transparency International, Corruption Perception Index and other international indicators related to Kazakhstan governance and institutions in this country are still structurally weak. The government, civil society is working quite a lot of that. A number of progress has been made, but this is an area to be addressed. Significant progress, in fact, was made in improving legal environment and formal institutions governing economic activity. However, informal institutions in Kazakhstan still play quite a large role. And moreover, the widespread informality of the labor market tends to be closely associated with bad jobs and with little salaries. In this regard, the introduction of, for example, of electronic payment system would be a most welcome initiative, as they limit the extent of everyday corruption. Other key interventions in this area include discouraging monopolistic practices, enhancing national procurement systems, and introducing participatory mechanisms informing budgets as an effective way to improve responsiveness to public needs. And again, this is an area where Kazakhstan now is working quite actively. So while the country, Kazakhstan, has made progress in some of this area in recent years, our study, this Asian development study, found that much more work needs to be done to help improve Kazakhstan international standing, especially in governance and institutions. So actually the study is quite rich. It would provide very specific policy indications, but because my time is limited and other speakers after me are going to give you a lot of examples on the supply side of the labor market, I would like to conclude by saying that demand-side strategies would help private sector development and economic diversification. Supply-side strategy would identify and build up skills, reduce spatial inequalities, and promote flexicurity, while policies enhancing governance and institutions would improve labor market intermediation and reduce corruption. Thank you very much for your attention.
Спасибо большое, уважаемый Джованни.
Thank you very much, Mr. Giovanni Capanelli, for your detailed report. The opening up the new positions is one of the key activities, and Asian Development Bank has been supporting the idea of the inclusive growth, and thank you very much for your extensive work. And now I would like to give the floor to the Dean of Moscow School of Management, Skolkovo, Business Skills of Future, please. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for participation. I do represent the Moscow School of Management, Skolkovo. It is a non-profit organization that provides the training of corporate personnel. It's one of the largest Eurasian corporate training personnel centers. I would like to look at the key management skills that we will need for the future. And please look at the slide. So how do we come up with the competencies? The survey that the World Bank made last year was a bit more aggressive, and it was the first time when the human capital was looked at as a separate category. Normally, human capital is a part of some indexes. However, they looked at the human capital as it is, and they looked at the human capital as if it was a general capital. So over here you see how much human capital we do have if you divide the human capital into three parts: the human, the traditional, so whatever's been produced before physically, and the natural capital, whatever we have under the surface. The developed countries, over 70% of the developed countries, capital is concentrated in humans. It is actually the human capital. So the surprise was that the the unhealthy and unwealthy countries, major capital is actually under the surface. It is a traditional capital. So there might be some tricks for such countries as Russia and Kazakhstan. So we are in between somewhere in this column. So Kazakhstan and Russia comply with the index that the middle level countries have demonstrated. So what is the trap? We are very rich with the natural resource, because our natural resources, our natural capital dominates. So in fact, what we're doing is that we have the situation when we rent, when we live for rent. However, the entrepreneurship, the capitalism, basic drivers are not that well developed in our countries. And if you look at SMEs, for instance, they have not been launched in the capital cities in most of the cases. They've been launched in the regions. The geography is complex. We don't have a developed infrastructure, so we have to support it all. So just a small part of our economy has been fully included into the modern economy, where the human capital is a major driver. So we do have two parameters. So the value chain. Google, Yandex, for instance, they don't have any natural resources, and they don't have any traditional capital. Their major capital is intelligence, and we have to be looking closely now at the transition peculiarities. So there are three elements that this conference has been discussing. So we have to be dealing with the person. We have to put the person into the center. We have to be dealing with the space, with the environment. I'm not talking about Russia or Kazakhstan. I'm looking at the city. The cities have not to be limited by the boundaries of the city. I'm talking about the conglomeration, and the diameter of that conglomerations would be up to 200 kilometers, let's say. So a couple of more pictures. So I think that most of you have seen this picture. So those are the tempos of technology growth for the last century. So we had to have 70 years in order to have one line telephone in each and every household. Right now we're talking about an immediate spread of cell technology, for instance. So the entire format of life has changed, and we cannot ignore this fact. So you see how fast we move forward. I'm not going to show you lots of slides, just the major ones. I would like to share with you our survey results. Mackenzie had the same survey actually, and the question was, what is the deficit in your case? We thought that it would be hardware, but in fact, the lack and the demand was demonstrated for culture and a lack of understanding of how the technology transition could be provided. So again, therefore, I would like to make just 3 references to you on the technological challenges that have very large presentations. So again, we have been running a couple of programs. Let's start with the program called The Human. The conclusion is, in fact, we don't have a training center so that we could train the manager who would understand that there are many areas located in between Europe and China. And in order to build up a real project, you have to be working together. So there's a special program for dual education. And our partners are business schools from 6 countries: Kazakhstan, Israel, India, US, Russia. And we think that this international cohort needs to pop up when the United Europe has been created. The first item they had in mind was that to launch a unified training platform. So we hope to have more students from Kazakhstan. Actually, Kazakhstan right now is sending many students over to Skolkovo, and this program, for instance, has 3 drivers, a great Eurasia that includes Europe and Central Asia and goes all the way up to China leadership. So the question is how a human being can keep up the self-motivation and innovation and technologies. There's one more reference of programs. We also do have a program called the Cities, and this is a heritage from the Soviet Union. Many cities do not have a function of a modern city. The only function they have is a function for ensuring the basic life processes. And right now we have launched a program called 300 mayors for cities. So what do we need to do in order to develop the business? How to engage the most active layers of the society? How to ensure one unified team to be covering those cities? So it is a joint program. And we've been actually astonished by the fact that when a general director of a large enterprise meets the mayor of the city, only when he or she participates in our program. So again, we're slowly but surely going away from a format that I don't want to be dealing with the social issues. Is not my piece of cake. And then you get the people who are really engaged. And the third component is technology. There's no management and there's no governance without technology, and we have a full range of programs on digital transformation. Digital transformation is not the one implemented in the Silicon Valley. It's not the program of the Irish data center. The large corporations keep working with the molecules, and however, those large corporations need to go through the digital transformations as well. We have gathered together the managers from the digital companies, and now we have a program for Chief Digital Transformation Officer. There's no ready answer. Together with those professionals, we deal with digital transformation-related issues, and we find the joint project that could be given a chance to the countries to be going to a new step of the modern economy. Thank you. Thank you very much. In fact, the adaptation of the new technologies is something that needs to be addressed in a quick manner. Last year, for instance, in 5 ministers of Kazakhstan, we introduced the new positions of the chief digital officer responsible for digitalization and the Ministry of Labor and Social Protection has one, and I'm responsible for digitalization in my ministry. So the next report is going to be made by partner for Eurasia, leader of tax and legal services of PwC, Mr. Michael Athen, human factor in the fourth industrial revolution. Please, the floor is yours, sir. If it is more comfortable for you to be speaking seated.
Moment. So, ladies and gentlemen, the topic for my 7 minutes is to talk about Industry 4.0 and the human factor. If I can sort of try to paraphrase what I think the topic is about, essentially it's about an old world of work and a new world of work. An old world where jobs were for life. Thank you. An old world where jobs were for life, people worked until retirement. They probably actually didn't change jobs during that period. There was very little technological change. But in fact, the world that we're living today is very different. It's a world where people are autonomous. They want a degree of entrepreneurship. They will change jobs multiple times. Technology will change. And the impact of that is that we're actually moving from a world where we created an environment where people actually needed a job to creating an environment where we have to ensure that people want to work in that environment. So it's a very different world. I only have 3 slides. My main objective today is the second and the third slide, which is around some practical recommendations for businesses to focus on. However, the first slide is to try to put the whole topic of people in an industrial context. So essentially, what is Industry 4.0? In essence, we're really talking about manufacturing industries, energy-related industries, which are characterized by a high degree of technological change. So it may be robotics, it may be cloud computing, it may be the Internet of Things. It's a manufacturing world characterized by technological change. Within that industrial world, there are various sort of subsections which make up the whole. What this slide is doing is showing to you that there are basically 4 subsets, and you see the bottom red subset is the people. But if I can just briefly sort of take you through what the 4 subsets are so you see the whole. So the customer solutions, by that it means how product services are provided to customers in a technological age. So it's the interface with business. Thereafter, the other 3 are more inward looking to the organization. So the operating systems are all the basic processes in an organization. It may be procurement, it may be logistics, it may have some people functions within there, but it's the basic components of business. The third element, which is the technology, is the ERP systems, which are pervasive in most organizations today. So it may be financial systems, stock systems, HR systems, but it's those all-embracing technology systems. And then the 4th dimension is actually the people dimension of the business, and that's really what the focus is today. If I just move to the next session. So now we're actually focusing on people issues. If I could try to put it in a little bit of a context for you by actually giving an example in the first place, and I'll talk about myself in a consulting environment. So I've spent 30 years of my life working in PwC. Basically, from a skill set dimension, I've really needed two skill sets. One has been technical skills, so whether you're an auditor, a management consultant, a tax consultant, you needed the technical skills. You also needed the commercial skills in order to interact with your clients, run the business. Today, there is a third dimension. And again, if I look at myself, that is what I have to focus on. I need to have a technology dimension to my work. And again, bringing it back to what I was saying previously, that has a number of aspects. So in terms of technology, we as a consulting organization need to rethink how we actually provide our services to customers or to our clients. It may in fact be the reports that we write, it's the meetings that we hold, but it's the whole interface with clients. That was the first point on the previous slide. And then from a more internal perspective, we also have various systems within the organization which are much more technologically advanced than they were. I'll give an example. In terms of HR, it would be something like Workday, which is an all-embracing HR system, starting with recruitment. It has learning and education modules. It'll have an L&E component. What we have to do as an organization in today's world is make sure that, in fact, dinosaurs like me are able to have that level of technological awareness to operate effectively. Our younger people already tend to have that. One of the most significant aspects of that will actually be learning and education. I think for many of our organizations, learning and education, training, etc., was a little bit vertical. So essentially, when you were at a particular level of seniority in an organization, you had certain particular types of training. So you were 2 years into the organization, you required these skill sets. You were 4 years into the organization, you required another level of skill sets. In fact, the way it's going to move now is far more from being this sort of vertical level of training to being a much more horizontal level of training. So in fact, I now attend trainings which are attended by people who have worked with the organization for 6 months, 2 years. I've been with the organization for 30 years. It's a very dramatic change in how business works. If I, just come back to these slides and move through 5 practical things very quickly. So the first point is around burnout, stress, etc. Probably a couple of points to make here. In fact, a very high number of people are suffering from burnout and stress. A very striking factor, in fact, is that your most engaged staff, your high performers, are probably, in fact, the ones who are actually suffering the highest degree of burnout. We'll typically think our high performers are okay, not to worry too much about them, but they in fact, are the ones who are suffering the stress. There's various things that can be done, and in the sort of middle column there, you'll see a couple of practical applications which are already happening in Kazakhstan. I'm going to mention one which I think is really outstanding. So it's actually an example from the oil and gas industry, where the company concerned is providing a confidential psychological helpline for staff. So this is all about mental health, not physical health. I stress it's confidential, but what it does is 24 hours a day, give the staff, whoever they are, the opportunity, simply if they need to talk to someone, they have that facility available. It's the type of thing which I think is more prevalent in the Western world, but I believe we will start to see a lot more of it in our environment. The other 2 points there are a little bit more obvious, but worth mentioning. So flexible working hours, we in fact know that some organizations in Kazakhstan allow staff to work 1-2 days from home. Actually, it's on the basis that it's not automatic. The staff need to apply. Clearly, there needs to be some governance around it, but it's possible. And then again, we also see, probably particularly in the consulting industry, but other organizations, there's considerable ability for flexible working hours. If I move on to the second point, social resilience, what exactly do we mean by social resilience? In a word, it's loneliness. So again, we probably don't realize, in fact, how much I use the word social resilience, but how much social contact, how much strength people actually get from their work connections. It's self-evident now where people are working flexible working hours, they're working from home, there's technology, etc. That degree of social interconnectedness that was happening on a day-to-day basis is diminishing. And that, again, has an impact on people. In fact, they need more than just their families. Again, there are very practical examples of what organizations can do. And again, just with reference to practices we see in Kazakhstan, a number of organizations are using what they call social interest groups. So again, it's identifying what people's hobbies are, what their likes and dislikes are, and creating some sort of mechanism within the organization for people to act on a more social basis. It's a very easy, practical thing to do. Third point, and again, I'll try to speed up in terms of the time, but I think this is really maybe the most key aspect here. So agility and adaptability. What this heading is referring to is the fact that just about everyone will now have a number of working lives. Typically, the number is referred to as 3, but we can all be certain that our roles will change within organizations, we may change between organizations, we may spend a period working for ourselves. And we all need to be equipped with the skills to be able to cope with that situation. Again, organizations can do a huge amount to help people prepare themselves for that. So again, secondments are just one example. Send people to another country. It's not just about the working skills they will acquire. It's all around the adaptability so that when change happens, people are equipped to cope. None of us actually, we may have change may occur voluntarily. I want to go and work in another country, or my organization may impose change for whatever reason on me. It's really important that we're equipped for the change. Entrepreneurship, again, is not necessarily a word which we all understand. It's all about innovation within an organization. I think we all recognize that younger people are very focused on innovation in a way that older people, such as myself, probably were less so. But in all our organizations, what we need to do to cater for that situation is develop a culture where people can innovate and in fact are encouraged to innovate. That may be through some sort of monetary rewards, it may be competition, it may merely be time. The PwC, whom I worked for in Poland for a number of years, actually allowed people 20% of their working time simply to focus on innovation. And again, it really changed the organization. The last point is something which we've known for a long time, but probably don't pay enough attention to. It's the idea of autonomy. What has changed recently is that I think whereas in the past we all knew that intrinsically autonomy was a good thing, what the developments in neuroscience have actually shown is that now you can see sort of behaviors in the brain, etc., which show various rewards, etc., how people are far more enthusiastic and committed as a result of having autonomy. So what we have to do in a working place, obviously in a controlled manner, is create mechanisms for people to have autonomy. Again, there's a number of statistics, a number of scientific studies that show where people have autonomy, it's not just the commitment that goes up, their decision-making improves, their degree of innovativeness improves. So it really is a hugely important factor. Just summing up the presentation from today, I think, in fact, there's probably a lot more than we realize at first glance that we can do within our organizations to actually, create an environment where people can, adapt, change, develop in this very rapidly, technologically changing world if we really set our minds to it. Thank you.
Спасибо большое, мистер Майк.
Thank you very much for covering this very interesting topic, and thank you very much for mentioning about the burnout and stress related to a work. It was a very interesting presentation for all of us, and I think that we're going to be taking that into consideration. Thank you again, Mr. Asen. The next speaker is the World Bank Program Leader for Human Development for Central Asia, Susanna Harapitsansa, Social Policies to Respond the Change in the Nature of Work. Thank you very much. I was asked to prepare the presentation in English. The room is going to be largely Russian-speaking, and I will report in Russian. So we looked at the fact how the technology has changed the world and what the potential for the technology to change the world is, and we have mentioned the fact that Kazakhstan has done a lot in terms of seeking for automation and shifting over to machines, and on the other hand, we will have the new opportunities provided thanks to the new technologies. We kept saying about the importance of the technological changes and the reforms that we need to seek for the enhanced skills and a new set of skills, in fact, and that the share of professions that need cognitive skills is also growing, and we're not talking about the developed countries starting from 2004 to 2014. In Ethiopia, for instance, the employment rate grew by 14%, for instance. We mentioned about the fact that the technological process has an impact on the performance of the country. You're well aware about the fact that it took IKEA 30 years to open up its branch offices in other countries, and at the same time, Alibaba reached 1 million of its users within 1 year, and the capitalization amount was $500 billion US. So the modern world is not. It's not abstract. I used to be working with a consultant who used to be sending the reports from Costa Rica, and he was sitting somewhere on the beach and, sending me very high quality reports. So the world is changing, and we are having more chances to work in a remote mode. and very, very successfully. So let's look at what has not been changed. Many things actually have not been changed. There's a huge gap in between the countries. I mean, the gap in between the developing and developed countries. So 40% of school students in the developing countries, for instance, have not gone through the minimum test for literacy and math. Can you imagine that? 40%, 40% of school students. So we're talking about the very minimum test for literacy. There's a gap in formal and informal employment. We're talking about 65%. The social protection programs is also something that that can be characterized as those who have social protection. So, okay, I've covered about this. So let's shift over to what the government can do in order to ensure the equality in terms of the opportunities, the technological opportunities and others, right? So first of all, let's talk about the human capital. I'm not going to spend lots of time. My colleague from ADB mentioned about the school education, horizontal education, vocational training, and so on. I'm going to be talking about the importance of the early learning of pre-primary school education based on evidences. The children have a very nice foundation to absorb the most advanced learning techniques. And again, we are in Kazakhstan right now, and 55% of children attend daycare centers, for instance. So, it's a pretty small number. You could see the picture depicting the brain of a kid, the kid who did not have any engagement opportunities and so on. And then this brain is compared to the brain of the kid who has been engaged into the social activity. So the program for social protection has a state guaranteed minimum as a summarized financial support for a large number of people. And there's a large debate right now about the universal-based income, the universal basic income that is to be provided to the entire population. There's not such an experience. Mongolia used to be having that initiative, but then they unfortunately did not succeed in 2 years' time. They stepped away from that program. The UPI had a very nice program in Alaska. However, when we used to be talking about the guaranteed minimum, the principle has to be in progressive university. So we have to be shifting over from most prominent layers of society to the others. And of course, those programs have to be added with the programs of social insurance. And in this regard, we're talking about the transformation as well. The world is changing. The compulsory social insurance is something that we're not going to be having anymore. Right now we're talking about a completely different practice. The world is changing, so therefore there's a concept of having the compulsory social protection. So it depends on who has been participating into the labor market or not. This needs to be added with the voluntary social insurance and non-voluntary social insurance as well. And certainly, when people get more protected with the social minimum programs, we can say that the regulation mechanism can be less tightened up, so you could make the rigid mechanisms less intense, that keep the business development in stagnation, because the people will be provided by those basic programs. There was a very interesting program in the UK. And those programs provide an opportunity for people to find jobs and to regulate the labor market overall is possible through those mechanisms. I used to be talking about the universal approaches to the social minimum. However, those programs need a lot of money. We are not talking about the universal UBI only. The question is how much is going to be cost to what the price is for this program. It is up to 9% of GDP. It's a huge amount of money. And for the developed countries, it's only 3.5%. And some of the references are Finland, for instance. Again, where to get money. So you could see on the screen that the incomes of the countries with the low income are 2 times less than those of the countries with a high income. So we should not be forgetting about the enhancement of administration of those incomes, taxation and so on. And at the same time, the taxation basis has to be intensified as well. The taxes for cities and so on. The taxes for sugar-containing products, for instance, and so on. So, thank you. Thank you very much. I like the idea of having the those 1,000 days are very important, and we are now having our last speaker, Ms. Suimbaeva, please. She's going to report about the perspectives of digitalization in Central Asia. So thank you. The floor is yours. Good afternoon, dear colleagues. I would like to thank the organizers to participate in this event. So currently you're aware about the fact that we are going to be having the 5th anniversary of the Eurasian Economic Commission. And the union is aimed at uniting 5 countries of the union in order to ensure the stable development, to improve the quality of life of our population. So one of the results of our union is the unified labor market. The agreement on the union has stipulated for equal opportunities for employment for all of the citizens of all member states, and has provided an entire series of preferences and benefits that are now available for this for all of the member states. So undoubtedly we are facing a very rapid development of technologies, artificial intelligence, and right now the Commission is working on how to improve the labor market to reflect those technological challenges and technological transition period. So, and of course, we should not be forgetting about its rapid impact from the technological transition over to the social sector. And currently, the Commission is aimed at creating the conditions to be reflecting those challenges, as I said, and we are now aimed at unifying the databases to reflect the human being, the human being and his or her prosperity. So overall, as you're aware about the fact, starting from 2014, we have started the working on a social protection package of documents, and in order to adhere the number of years that the employee has worked so far, and so on, the other labor-related issues and the registration issues are going to be regulated within this law. Mr. Saparbayev has reported that the electronic employment database has been launched in Kazakhstan, and Kazakhstan has also initiated creation of the decrease of financial risks and so on. I would also like to say that the electronic databases are going to be enhancing the state services and registration procedures, as well as it will give a chance to access for healthcare services and so on. So the unified labor market again is going to foster the activities within the union, and will also contribute into the success of the union. In 2019, the Commission is going to be having the series of events aimed at developing the digital ecosystem, including the registration, remote employment, pension coverage, insurance, and so on. And we also plan that within this framework, we are going to be having a wide range of technical technical support documents such as electronic labor agreements and so on. The practice that the other members of the union has, we will have a chance to provide our services in an electronic format. I think that this is a quite doable initiative, and besides, our commission is planning to create databases to control remotely the quality of professional education existing in the member states. Besides, we have lots of migration-related issues, and our commission has provided an initiative to conjointly with all of the member states to look at the opportunities to inform the citizens on the cases of any administrative violations, fines, and so on, so that any citizen, any employee who has any penalties to be covered would be aware of that penalty. And as a closing remark, I would like to say that the Eurasian Economic Commission is going to be supporting all of the initiatives that have been brought by the member states on employment, and the best practices and recommendations are going to be taken into consideration by the Commission, so that we support the unified labor market. Thank you very much. I would like to thank the Eurasian Economic Commission for your support to unified electronic employment database. And this year we're going to be having this survey of how well that system is functioning. So thank you very much. It's a very important. It's very important for us. Thank you very much, dear speakers, for your excitement. We have a very small video clip, so we would like to show it to you. Just 90 seconds. Thank you.
Время неосязаемо. Его невозможно почувствовать, увидеть. Но парадокс в том, что время можно подчинить. Принцип работы часовщика практически не изменился. Познавать азы этой профессии можно на протяжении всей жизни. Выходит, что кропотливый труд не подвластен времени и высоким технологиям.
Подход к фермерству за последние годы сильно изменился. Условия труда стали лучше. На помощь человеку пришла умная техника. Она помогает выращивать больше урожая, тратя на это вдвое меньше человеческих ресурсов.
Еще каких-то пару лет назад новорожденные дети, которые весят меньше килограмма, не выживали. Врачи, конечно, боролись за их жизнь, но в большинстве случаев безрезультатно. Новые технологии облегчили труд медиков и подарили детям шанс на здоровое будущее.
Бионический протез для человека. Раньше это казалось чем-то невообразимым, но наука и технологии – это бесконечный источник знаний, которые можно использовать всю жизнь. С бионическим протезом можно трудиться.
Привет, меня зовут Куаныш. Я работаю в Косточке. Моя задача – помогать людям отвечать на их вопросы. Каждый из нас, будь он робот или человек, должны работать ради лучшего будущего.
Так, еще раз всем большое.
Thank you very much once again. And the outcomes that we have demonstrated are very, very important and complex. Thank you once again. Let me reiterate that this joint work is going to be very fruitful. Thank you.